Hi, this is Dr. Sana Hashmi, and this week in my Prince Eye on China column, I discussed the Chinese discourse and the narrative on the so called G2 that was recently again announced by the US President Donald Trump. So, on his social Truth Social, he actually, before meeting Chinese President Xi Jinping in South Korea in Busan on the sidelines of the epic, he actually posted that G2 is convening shortly, and his recent claims that he had a truly great meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping in Busan, calling it a G2, has stirred quite a buzz in China, particularly on the Chinese internet. Of course, this is something that is not new, but how Trump, after the trade tech war, is talking about G2 is something that is attracting a lot of attention in China on the Chinese internet. And for example, on Weibo, China's microblogging website uses welcome, what they called a polite America, and US is becoming more polite, relatively polite towards China. But then at the same time, many warn that China should not fall for Trump's G2 gimmicks. It's all a show, it's all a pretense. This was actually one of the most common arguments, references to this G2 uh, episode. Now, Trump also says that the US and China could solve all the world problems if they cooperate together. So, this is basically the idea of the G2. And as quoted by the Global Times, he also spoke about the US and China being friends and partners. So, this is something that we are hearing after a very, very long time. And this all seems optimistic. And on the surface, maybe US China finally trying to coexist and cooperate for the greater good of the world. But in China, people do not really think so. And the online response in China was actually mixed. Hashtags about the meeting got tons of millions of views, hundreds and thousands of views. Some did see some hope for a thaw, but this is a minority. Majority saw intentional malice, a potential trap from the US side. So now let's begin with what's this G2 all about. So it's actually an idea that the US and China, as the world's two largest economies, two biggest powers with huge, massive military, tech power, could co-manage global affairs. And as I've already mentioned, this is something that is not new. We have heard about this at least since Obama times. Obama talked about potential G2, and then even before him, this idea had been floated. And on paper, that sounds pragmatic. Together, they make up more than 40% of global GDP and nearly half of all defense spending in the world. But it's easier said than done. And in reality, it's way complicated. Now, experts in China note that the two systems, Chinese system and the US system, the Western liberal system to be precise, are fundamentally different ideologically, politically, and strategically. Economically, it does make sense, but ideologically, geopolitically, it doesn't make sense. And this is something the idea G2 is bound to fail. Yes, but they also agree that cooperation at the same time is necessary. But well, they are the question they're asking is will there be equality? And the answer is that's harder. So several Chinese scholars say that Trump's G2 talk might be a way to save face for Trump, and maybe this is an opportunity that Chinese should take opportunity. Shan Yi, who is from Fudan University, he's a prominent scholar on US-China relations, and on the Chinese internet, he's actually called as an opinion leader on the US-China relations. He says that it signals space for dialogue, and this is something that may lead to greater cooperation and may lead to ease of tensions between the US and China. While another prominent scholar on the US China relations, Chin Kang Rong, he calls it an important development. So, overall, academic discussion, I would say the majority of academic discussion on this issue is somewhat pragmatic or hopeful, relatively hopeful, maybe by design. Yet, there are other scholars who warn that it's mostly about optics. There's hardly any substance, there's hardly any genuine attempt to collaborate from the US side. For example, a scholar from Shanghai International Studies University, Huang Cheng, argues that Trump is under immense domestic pressure and he needs quick foreign policy wins before the midterms. So this was his idea that his it is all politics is local, and this charm offensive towards China, it might just be a political theater primarily to achieve the domestic gains. But then majority, as I've already mentioned, majority of the academic discussion, the strategic circle is seeing it as a positive development. This might be by design, or this is something of maybe we could call it as hopeful rhetoric from their side. But the Chinese internet, the Chinese social media is not really agreeing with what the academic circle is saying. And the mood of the Chinese social media is cautious. For example, Bilibili bloggers, that is a TikTok version in China, most of them call this G2 idea a show. And on another social media website, Chihu uses, that is Chinese Quora, they say that it's been repeatedly said by a number of US presidents. Obama said it, Trump has been saying with little to show for it. There is no substance, there's hardly any substance. These are just words. So these words need to be met with actions, which is largely absent. Then on Pai Chiahao article, it warned that G2 setup could actually turn China into a US subordinate. And this is something that we are not seeing this argument on the English media. And this is very, um, I would say that this is something that I only saw it on the Chinese internet, that how G2 could actually lead China to become a junior partner of the US. And this is something just to keep a watch on China. So, from Chinese perspective and from multiple perspectives, it is a non starter. And they believe that this will again be rejected by China. And so, why do they say it? So, because China, so there were a number of reasons that were given on the reasons that were given on the Chinese internet, and one of the main reasons was that G2 is actually a form of alliance, and China does not really believe in and form exclusive alliances. And they also see this G2 as a hegemonic framework from the US side. So China also rejects hegemonic framework. This is what they're saying. And they view this as an American G2 concept that is only going to be self-serving, and self-serving only for the US, and not for the Chinese. And also, even if it serves the Chinese purpose at all, what they're also projecting that this is now going to be favorable to the global south, to the developing countries, and China even today call itself as a developing country. And in this perspective, the G2 is aspirational US thinking. This has been in works, sorry, not in works, at least in the US thinking for a long time, but this is not a roadmap for China. So the takeaway from Chinese commentary is pretty clear that while Trump may finally be acknowledging Chinese strength, and this is one of the reasons why he's he is proposing this G2 idea, because now he is recognizing China's strength, and then he's also recognizing that China is standing up to a bully, and China is responding to the US unfair trade tariff with equal strength, and now US is realizing that it cannot really fight the Chinese. So that recognition stems more from the G2 recognition comes more from fear than friendship, than the idea of genuine and true collaborations. And the G2 in Beijing eyes is not cooperation, it's commitment that is actually under the guise of partnership, that is dressed up as partnership. So this is what their idea is about G2. So China does not really see itself as a co-manager of the world with the US, but as a power that is on its own trajectory, one that no longer needs Washington's validation. So when Trump calls it a G2, many in China hear something else. And what they see and what they hear is a trap. And this is something that I saw in a lot of commentaries and a lot of arguments on the Chinese social media. For a number of Chinese internet users, it is not about sharing global leadership, it is about making China subordinate to the US. The Chinese discourse tells us that there is confidence in China now that was never seen before, that it does not need the US or maybe want the US to co govern the world with it. G2 will only limit its capabilities and abilities to lead the world. China believes, and the Chinese narrative, the discourse suggests that China now has the wherewithal and capabilities to be the global leader, and it is on its way to surpass the US in all aspects. So, in this telling of the Chinese narrative, G2 is a non appealing concept, is a non starter to China, and therefore it is a no from China for G2. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.